Hey there, Space Kittens. This is Gimme Empathy, the podcast. Not to be confused with Gimme Empathy, the chain of luxury hotels, or Gimme Empathy, the breakfast cereal. This one's the podcast, and I'm your host, Scott Mercer. Right now, I'm listening to ABC Classic FM through some headphones to create the illusion that I'm not totally insane talking to myself in front of my computer. It helps having some other noise going on. I don't know what music it is. I think the guy might have said it was Dvorak or something. Anyway, it helps me. And by extension, you, I suppose. I had a big weekend. Played a gig with the band We All Want To, along with Tim from last week's episode. Tim actually did double duty. So we had this gig on Saturday. We played at this cancer fundraiser / duck race thing down along Riverside Drive in West End along the river. And we were actually playing on a barge about 10 metres offshore. And Saturday, if you live in Brisbane, you may recall it was pissing down rain all day. So it was very, very wet and not a lot of people turned up. And the ones that did, sitting in the beer tent, were even over there on the shore, they were standing in about 2 inches of water in the wet, wet grass. So we were out there on this barge that would rock back and forward every time the city cat went by, hoping that our gear wasn't going to electrocute us. And in the end, we kind of got to that point where we gave each other that look like, I don't know how we all got here, but we can have fun with this. And it was actually quite an enjoyable gig. And then that turned into this whole other big night, and I wound up in a mysterious jazz club in the city at 3 a.m. But it was really fun. And it was cool getting to see Tim playing with Screenfeeder earlier in the day, and then getting to play with him in We All Want To later on. Speaking of Tim, this week's guest is tied very closely to Tim. I'm talking to Ruby Roberts. Tim has been her partner for the past 8 years. One of the good things about this podcast has been having the opportunity to really get to know some people who I don't necessarily know that well in my life. And Ruby was one of those people, and she's a really bright and fascinating person with a really interesting story. And it was really cool to get to sit down with her for this week's episode. Ruby spent most of her life in Armidale. She's gone through several interesting life phases, including as a small-town journalist and then now as a disability support worker. And the story of how she and Tim met and how she came up here is just ridiculously cute. This was a really fun chat. So here it is, episode 18, Ruby Roberts. Just to get a level, what did you have for breakfast this morning, Ruby?
I had porridge.
What kind of porridge? What was in it?
It had seeds in it. It had linseed, ground linseed. We've got a little coffee grinder thing that we grind seeds in. So it had ground linseed and almonds, and it had raspberries on the top, thawed frozen raspberries.
I used to get linseeds, but I could never bother to grind them up.
Yeah.
Because they're super good for you, aren't they?
They're meant to be, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they add much of a taste, like those kind of little seedy, nutty things?
Yeah, I think they do a little bit. I mainly have them because, I've heard some health benefit thing somewhere along the line and thought, oh, that sounds good. And they're meant to be very good for your gut health. Like
they feed the gut bacteria in them?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's so weird that, what is it they say that something like 80% of your insides aren't human. It's just bacteria that are making everything run.
I know, that's so crazy to me. I went through a stage where I was really interested in the gut and reading all these books about, how we've got not only our DNA, but all the DNA of all the different bacteria in our guts that's kind of programming who we are. And so it's so much more complicated than they ever realised.
It made me think when or if they try and clone people, how are they going to get the bacteria stuff right? When they cloned Dolly, did they get all the sheep gut bacteria and put it in her? Or what?
Gosh, what an interesting question. I had not thought about that before. I've got no idea. But yeah, you would think that would make a difference. I guess it's, you know what, it would be a very interesting scientific study to clone two people, or 2 animals even, and then put different gut bacteria in each one to see the impact.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That would be fascinating. It would be almost like identical twin studies. In fact, you could clone heaps and see what happened.
I wonder if there's even a field of research into like experimenting with putting different bacteria in you to increase metabolism or like make you work better. Is that even a field of research?
I believe so. There's a book that I've just read by Mike Mosley called The Clever Guts Diet, and he talks about a type of bacteria. It starts with the letter A. I can't remember the name of it, but it is meant to be present in large numbers in people who don't gain weight easily, and not really present in people who are overweight and obese. And it lives on mucus rather than the food that you put into your gut. And so he was saying that one of the things you can do is if you fast, not that I'm trying to be like a big evangelist about Mike Mosley, but if you fast, this bacteria will kind of breed up. So you've got more of it in your gut. It can be a good way for people to lose weight.
It's fascinating. People are just big ecosystems, really.
I know, right? It is very fascinating. I think in another life I'd love to be like a, microbiologist studying tiny little flora and fauna and in our guts and stuff. Yeah.
Ruby, how do you know me?
How do I know you? I know you because I go out with your bandmate.
The boss.
Tim Baggins, Tim Steward. Yeah, so, and I was just saying to Tim in the car, it's going to be interesting tonight because from what I gather, I'm the first person that you've really got on your show that you don't know that well. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, you're a radio presenter, so you've probably interviewed a lot of people that you don't know very well, but, this is kind of your personal project. And, it's been so interesting listening to all the other people that you talk to who you've obviously got some kind of a relationship with and hearing their stories. And I'm wondering what comes of this interview will be impacted by the fact that we don't know one another very well.
Yeah, I feel like I have more questions for you to start with than someone I know better. I guess, the only other one I didn't know was Lisa.
Oh, really? I thought you guys were like, wow, from the actual listening to that podcast, I thought you guys were like chums. Big time chums.
I only met her in April at the Rock and Roll Writers Festival.
Cool. Wow, because you guys just clicked so well. That's what it sounded like.
Well, she's such a great storyteller as well and has such an amazing story, really.
Yeah, she was awesome.
Do you want to tell the story of how you met Tim? Because Tim has told me, but I think it's just so cute.
Oh,
and I think,
okay.
and like in a really, like a very modern rom-com kind of way.
Yeah, I guess it kind of, you know what? Yeah, it would be a great script for a rom-com actually. Yeah, Tim and I was a single mum, kind of was resigned to the fact that I'd probably be alone for a long time, that kind of thing. And Tim was a single dad, I guess. And, we were just playing Scrabble on Facebook, as you do. And, I just happened to click on play a random player. And I got this profile, which was a little boy, black and white. And it looked like someone from the Great Depression. Like he had a kind of a side part. It looked kind of a very austere photo. I mean, I think I probably read a lot into it. So I assumed, and he was very, very, very good at Scrabble. And I'm not bad at Scrabble. I'm quite good. And so to find somebody that consistently beat me over and over again kept me playing. So that's how come I actually even played Tim more than once, is because he was so good at Scrabble. Anyway, so we were playing for ages and I think we occasionally said one or two things to one another, but, that was about it. Then one day Tim changed his profile pic. Obviously he's not like an old guy living in a library, in a library with a tweed suit the way I'd pictured. I was like, holy cow, he's young. And he was with his daughter Pascal. And I was like, oh, wow. And I said, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to be so young. And is that your girlfriend? And he said, oh, no, that's my daughter. And I was like, oh, oh, beep, beep, sorry. Anyway, somehow, I don't even know really how, but we kind of got talking and then I changed my profile pic and then we kind of sussed each other out and we kind of realised that we both loved, well, we obviously had a common love of Scrabble, but we figured out we both loved, music and reading and all different things. And we just kind of started emailing one another and then that led to sort of chats and we went through this phase where we'd sort of drink lots of wine and, send each other these sort of multiple emails in a night, and it was all very exciting. And then one night I plucked up the courage and called him, and it just sort of happened within a few months. And then we decided to meet up in Bellingen, and which is a cute little town near Coffs Harbour in northern New South Wales.
Because you were living in Armidale.
Yeah, I was living in Armidale. He was living in Brisbane, obviously. Oh, yeah, I forgot that part of the story. Yeah. So, yeah, it was pretty random. I mean, to click on a random Scrabble game one day and to end up meeting somebody and falling in love. I mean, I guess it is pretty rom-com-y.
And that was 8 years ago.
And yes, and the rest, as they say, is history. 8 years ago now, yeah. So going into our 9th year.
Were you born in Armidale?
Yes, actually, I was born in Byron Bay. My parents were kind of doing the freewheeling 70s thing. I think they wanted me to be born by this particular birthing method called La Boya, which was all about, low lighting and very hippie and lots of candles and things. That was something that they could do in Byron, but not Armidale. And then 2 weeks later, they moved to Armidale.
And you lived most of your life there?
Yeah, most of my life in Armidale.
What kind of kid were you like growing up?
I was a very weird kid, I think. Very, very, I was off in my own world for years and years, and quite a solitary child, I think, and always got a lot of comments like she's in cloud cuckoo land and off in a dream and, that kind of stuff. Took me a long time to get my head around how to interact with other humans.
Did you read a lot of books?
Yes, a lot of books. And I used to read, if I really liked a book, I would read it. Like there are books that I can remember reading 30 times at least. There was a few by Enid Blyton, so daggy, but there was a few by Enid Blyton, that The Magical Wishing Chair, and what else was there? The Naughtiest Girl in the School. There was a few sort of titles that I must have read them. And Anne of Green Gables was another one that I just read. And Roald Dahl. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like I practically know all of those stories backwards because I just read them so many times when I was a kid. Yeah.
Did you go to uni after you finished school?
Yeah, I went to uni. I was a very floaty young person, and I guess I'm from Gen X, and so we were kind of the era where, little Johnny Howard hadn't gotten his hands on Centrelink yet. So, I spent about a year floating around on the Dole and, that sort of thing. And then, drifted around, did fruit picking, travelled around. And then I went to Southern Cross Uni in Lismore, and by that stage, Johnny Howard was, saying, well, come on, guys, you're giving us a bit of a kick up the bum and saying you got to do something with your life other than be share housing dole bludgers. And so I thought, okay, I'll do an arts degree. So I don't
think that's what John Howard had in mind.
No, but it sort of it kept everyone happy, and it was a lot of fun, and it was actually, it was a good move for me. Like it was a good direction, and I did get a lot more out of it other than just keeping the government happy. I'm so glad that I did that degree. So,
what was your major in the arts?
I did a double major in media communications and a minor in creative writing.
Did you know what you wanted to do for a career when you were at uni?
No idea. No, I didn't. I think I was it took me a long time to get grounded in the world and to sort of, I think actually having a child, suddenly I went, oh, okay, I've got to actually write. I've got to make money, and I've got to, think about how I'm going to keep a roof over my head for the next 40 years, and I don't want to do something that I hate. And it was actually hugely confronting because I think I'd sort of floated before then.
When did you have Rocky?
I was 27.
Out of uni?
I'd just finished uni.
Right.
And kind of had this vague plan that I was going to go and teach English in Korea. But I was really I just don't think I had the emotional maturity to really know what I was doing. So, so I got pregnant. To someone that I'd been with for only a matter of months, a couple of months.
And what was that like? How did that immediately alter your life?
I had no idea what I was in for when I got pregnant. Like, again, you know, very emotionally immature. I kind of was like, oh, I'll have a baby and, you know, oh, I'll be at home all day. I'll be able to do lots of writing and, you know, have all these hobbies and do gardening and it's going to be so great and maybe I'll go traveling. And I'm not going to be one of those parents that just, you know, ends up doing nothing with their lives. You know, I'm just going to strap my kid on and I was so naive, like a little papoose and travel the world. And I was going to be this exciting parent that did all this cool stuff. But then you have a baby and you realize, oh crap, it's not quite like that. So I think I think it wasn't until I actually had Rock that I kind of came down to reality with a thud and went, holy crap, I'm a grown up. Well, I'm not a grown up, but I'm just going to have to become a grown up really damn fast and figure out what that's all about.
And where did you land on a job? When did you decide what you wanted to do?
Well, I was always very good at writing and I'd done a media degree, so it just seemed like the logical thing to do was to go into journalism. So that's what I did. I started out in a little, like doing kind of sort of semi-freelance work for a little newspaper, Richmond Riverside in Evans Head, and I did that for a while. And then, yeah, my dad got sick, so I moved to Armidale, and then I got a full-time job as a journalist with the Armidale Express. Yeah, which was an interesting time. Like, I did learn a lot. I think, yeah, it definitely brought me down into reality with a thud, doing journalism in a regional town.
What was your beat? What area of the...
Okay. Well, it's really interesting. In regional newspapers, I mean, I think that things have changed a lot now because, you know, a lot of them are shutting down. Yeah. And so you tend to wear a lot of hats in regional newspapers because the community is smaller. So therefore you have a smaller team of journalists. So I actually, when I first went to the Armidale Express, I spent I think a couple of months as the sports editor. And here's me, I hadn't even done my cadetship or anything and don't know a thing about sport, not a thing. And I had to write article after article about all these football games and cricket matches. And oh my God, it was so bad. I was so bad at it. But a lot of it, I guess, regional reporting, I did do a little bit of things like book reviewing. You have a bit of freedom. So I did do, you know, a bit of artsy stuff and uni stuff. But a lot of it is really reporting on car crashes and small town gossip, really.
Did you have to do that thing where you go to the house of a family member of someone who's died in a car crash and to talk to them or anything?
Well, luckily for me, there was a guy who, most of the journalists were cadets or very early in their career. But there was this guy, Peter Barrett, and he was a vintage old hard-boiled journalist that had been there since, you know, everything was done with pen and ink kind of thing. And he did a lot of that really hard stuff. He just took on that stuff. So I did a few things. I went to, you know, fires burnt down, but I didn't really have to deal, thank goodness, with traumatised families. Although, having said that, it was actually dealing with a traumatised refugee from Sudan and a court case involving her that led me to end up thinking this is not for me.
What was the story there?
Well, she was a young woman. She was probably about 19. Beautiful soul. I used to see her. She worked in a coffee shop in town and just a really lovely woman. But she was a very troubled woman. You know, growing up in Sudan, God only knows what she'd been through, but it can't have been pretty. I don't even know. I was actually sub-editing at this time because I ended up doing a lot of sub-editing, which is what I love to do more than actually doing journalism in the end.
Is that the thing where you just go through and check for mistakes and
yeah. I used to lay out the paper and I used to correct grammar and spelling errors and, you know, sort of get, you know, if people had written a clumsy sentence or whatever, that was my job to fix that. And I loved that. It was so good. I just, you know, like you with your podcast, I'd sit there with my headphones all day, you know, just correct errors. And I couldn't have been happier, really. But apparently they've outsourced all that to New Zealand or something now, so I wouldn't be able to get that job back even if I wanted to. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the Sudanese girl. Yeah, so she had a problem with authority and particularly police in uniform. I think, from what I gathered from the court case, I think she'd had some pretty horrible experiences from people in uniform, as you can imagine. And she was really drunk one night and she had PTSD and she attacked a police officer and had a pretty darn good go at this guy. And then she went to court and it was just really horrible because I knew that she had PTSD and that she was a really good person and she'd just been through trauma. I wrote this article about her and I sort of said, you know, like I wrote it very much in sympathy for her, I've got to say. But because we were in a small town, I think, and just because it was quite a conservative paper, the editor kind of rewrote a lot of what I wrote and kind of made it about, you know, that she was this horrible person that had attacked the cops and it's good that she's, you know, and put my byline underneath. And I just felt so, it really upset me because I was sympathetic to the cop. Nobody deserves to be attacked and cops have a really hard job and I really feel for them. But this woman, you know, I'd known her as being this lovely woman that serves coffee in the cafe and she'd really worked hard to build a life for herself in Australia. And she had terrible, terrible trauma. And I didn't think that she deserved to be treated like a criminal. I thought she just needed mental health support. Yeah, so things like that would come up a lot, you know, in that kind of work. And I found that I was too sensitive for that. So.
And that really turned you off journalism?
Yes, it did. Yeah, I think to be a journalist, there's a part of you, especially in small town journalism. And look, I don't mean to diss people who are small town journalists. And I think there's some wonderful journalists living in regional areas. But I think there is an element of people hearing a car crash on the radio or something and then rubbing their hands together and thinking, oh, I'm going to sell lots of papers today. Like you kind of have to be a little bit like that to make money because, you know, that's the stuff that sells papers in small towns. So that's not a nice workplace to be in if you're a sensitive kind of person that doesn't like to exploit people. And I don't know, it just wasn't for me.
So after journalism, where did you pivot from that?
What actually got me to leave the Armidale Express, and I want to say just for a sec, I don't mean to disrespect people at the Armidale Express. There was some fantastic people at the Armidale Express and my editor was really nice, and so I just want to say that because I thought, I hope I haven't been disloyal.
That's good because about 70% of our listenership is made up of the Armidale Express employees.
I know. I'm going to get like some letter in the mail suing me. Fairfax Media will never employ me again. That's all right. They don't have to. Yeah, I moved to Brisbane to be with Tim, actually. I kind of thought, okay, well, I've been doing journalism for X amount of years. I think it was like 9 years or something. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I'll, keep going for journalism. And I went for job after job after job after job after job after job after job. I must have gone for, I don't know, it would have had to have been getting close to 100 jobs. And I think I got 2 interviews and very little else back. I don't know. I guess maybe it was just really bad timing and, things were drying up in that. But I just couldn't seem to find work. And I thought I had a really good resume and I had experience and I was an award-winning student at uni and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, so I had to very quickly kind of think, well, okay, if I'm not going to be a journalist, what am I going to be? And I ended up, Cerebral Palsy League actually employed me to do a kind of a traineeship in disability support, and that's what I'm doing now, and I love it. So, yeah, I actually feel like I'm in a job that I'm much better suited to now.
What does that job involve day to day?
It involves pretty much supporting people with disabilities to live the sort of lives that we all aspire to, I guess, like being in the community, taking their place in the community, taking part in the community, being included. It's kind of allowing people access into the community and also kind of advocating for them and working towards having a more inclusive world where people with disabilities are just with everybody else in the community and not a separate little kind of segregated little group of people that, nobody knows about kind of thing.
So specifically with cerebral palsy, what are some of the common things that you help them with?
Okay, well, I'm not actually working in Cerebral Palsy League at the moment. But okay, if I was to talk about cerebral palsy, the meat and bones of what I do is I support people to, do tasks of daily living. Like some people need assistance with having a shower. Some people need assistance with meal times. Someone with cerebral palsy, say, may not have the range of movement that you or I have, or they may not chew the way you or I do. So my job is to support them so they can have their meals however they have their meals. And then, so there's the support with like domestic tasks and, all the life tasks that we all have, like whatever support they need, which varies so much depending on the disability. And then there's the other side of my job, which is the part that I love the most, which is, supporting people to follow their dreams and their passions, do whatever it is they love, like fundraising or, playing sport or doing art or running a business or,
So is there like an office you go to, or do you go straight to people's homes or out and about and help them?
Well, at the moment, one of the places I work is kind of like a big living facility with quite a few people in it. And my job there is to support those people to go on outings and also just to have meaningful jobs in the community. So I have one fellow who I support to do volunteer work at a church. And then I have another one who plays bocce and does fundraising. And then I might take someone to the movies one day, or we might go for a big walk at Sandgate. Or we go to reading groups at the library. So, that's my job with them. And then I have people out in the community and I might, help them get ready to go out in the morning, and then we'll go to Chermside shops and have some morning tea or, just the stuff that everybody wants to do. They want to do the same thing, so I support them to do it.
The people at this facility, do they have like a variety of disabilities?
Well, their support needs are relatively complex and a little bit higher than average, and that's why they're in this facility. So they need quite a lot of support, and that's why they're living there. Like in an ideal world, they live in their own homes and, have that support in a house. But, some people, they need round-the-clock support, and a lot of the people that I support there have intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities. They might have severe epilepsy, that kind of thing. They need, and they have staff like nurses on call and all of that sort of stuff. So, these people are kind of quite complex. Like, it's actually unusual now. There's fewer and fewer people living in these kind of institutional settings now, because it's thought that people are better off living at home and having support to live life in the community in a normal house.
Right, yeah.
So,
Ruby, did you have a prepared topic you wanted to talk about?
Well, I thought I'd pick metacognition.
Are there some thought patterns you find yourself thinking again and again? Are there thought patterns you try and break out of, like negative thought cycles?
Yeah, okay. Well, I have an interesting thing. I've got a couple of things that I've discovered as I've gotten older. One is that I always assumed until I was about 30 that everybody had the same thought processes that I'd had, in that I have a narrator in my mind that narrates my world. I've got is it a voice? I don't know. I have a very verbose mind. Like, I think in words very much. And I was speaking to like this guy who ran a shop downstairs from where I used to live, and he said he didn't have a narrator in his mind. And I was like, whoa, I thought everybody had that. And he said, no, I think in pictures. And I was like, wow, I cannot imagine having a mind where you don't have a narrator going. And then, it was like this eye-opening moment where I kind of realized, holy cow, people's way of seeing the world. Like, if I got in someone else's brain, it would be so much more freaky than I could even imagine.
This is really interesting, because I don't think I think in many words either. Like, I don't have a narrator. I think I'm like the shopkeeper. Like, I'm more picture or moving pictures, I guess. Like, if I'm not occupied by doing something, like if I'm just sitting on the bus or out for a walk, I think of in my mind, the way it runs, it's like little movies. Like I'll think of things that happened in the past, things that could happen in the future, like scenarios. And so that involves words, like it involves, people talking to each other or how I'm going to say things or write things. But it's not like reading a book. So what's it like for you? Is it, when you say there's like a narrator, is it narrating what is happening to you currently? Or is it about the future, the past?
It's a bit of a mix of things. So it's sort of a voice that talks me through my day. So I'll go into the kitchen and I'll be like, I might have this or this for breakfast. And it's like I've got a little narrator saying, what will I have for breakfast today? I'll have this or I'll have this or, Or, for example, like if I think about the future and the past, it's usually in terms of conversations I've had with people. And like I'm the kind of person, I'll be walking along and I'll be having a mental argument with someone in my mind and my facial expression will actually look really angry because I'm so caught in what I'm thinking that.
I do that too sometimes. I'm sure this has to be a common thing where you go back and think of something you could have said better or like had some comeback to someone. So when I do that, I will make the face and like mouth some of the words and I catch myself doing it. It's like, oh, come on. There's got to be a better way to spend that time you've spent trying to come up with a better thing to say to
someone from 2 weeks ago that said something that you didn't agree with.
Yeah,
I do that a lot. And the other one is Tim and I realise this. It's quite interesting when you have somebody that you spend time with for a long time and you get to know one another and you also get to know yourself in a weird way. And when I'm in a party or something like that, or if I'm in a group of people, and even to extent now, when I'm in a conversation, I have a sort of a narrator that sort of tells me what the social rule is. For example, if I'm having a conversation at a party, there's a sort of a narrator that says, okay, make sure that you ask the other person about their life. Don't just talk about your life. And then I've got another voice that says, no, it's not different voices. That makes me sound like I've got psychosis. I don't have psychosis. But it's like a kind of a rule maker that sort of tells me the social conventions as I'm having a conversation. And Tim's been with me for long enough that he can see the process of this voice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he can really see it. He can see the thought processes that I'm having and the formula that I follow when I'm having conversations with people and stuff like that in a way that other people probably wouldn't even notice. But yeah, and I thought that everybody did that. I thought that everybody had this kind of, but I think I don't think other people do. I think a lot of people, it's much more instinctive, and I didn't realise that.
No, I have something like that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, like I have to remember to do some things because for a long time I was quite socially awkward, and I still am. And so sometimes, do you find you're just in a mood where you're just better at talking to people, and you can't quite pinpoint why?
I'm not too bad at small talk. I'm not too bad at like walking past someone in the garden saying, hey, your flowers look nice in your garden, or, I'm not too bad at that. I'm quite in my element at that, but anything beyond that is quite challenging for me always.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm good at small talk because I have an idea of what to say, how are you, weather, traffic, that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
But because I don't really care. And I wouldn't be interested if someone asked me that. So I can go through the motions, but I'm not sure if I'm good at it because I don't value it myself.
Ah, right.
I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose for me, sort of small talk is my way of feeling connected to the world. Actually, oftentimes that's when I feel most connected to the world, is when I'm just sort of saying, oh, your dog's gorgeous. And, to me, that feels like there's a sort of a commonality to people at that level that I can tap into in a way that I can't tap into any deeper than that.
Why can't you tap into it deeper than that?
Well, that's the thing that I've only really figured out since I've sort of been with Tim, I guess. I mean, I do have that deeper connection with Tim, obviously, because he spends a lot of time with me, but he can really see it in me that when I'm in a social situation, most of the time, I'm following a script and it's kind of cookie cutter, and I'm playing a role, I suppose. I don't really know how to explain it.
How did you develop the script?
I think when I was very young, I honestly didn't understand how to relate to other human beings. Like I literally, when I was a kid, that whole thing of going up to people, saying hello, how are you, all of that stuff didn't come naturally to me at all.
Same, yeah.
So it was all a learned thing for me. And I suppose I learned it by watching other people, or from my mum saying, if someone pays you a compliment, make sure you find time in the conversation to pay them a compliment. Don't necessarily do it straight away, but make sure you do that. So I've been taught that. So if somebody pays me a compliment and I'm in a conversation, I will always try and find something to compliment them on and put it into the conversation later. And that's something that but it's definitely something that I do very consciously. And pretty much everything is like that for me when I'm with other people.
When you're following this script that you piece together over the years for the right way of going about a conversation, is that something you enjoy doing? Is it stressful to try and check all these boxes?
I detest it. I love one-on-one. I'm pretty good at one-on-one, but going into group situations is really hard for me, and it's very stressful. Like I was at a meeting the other day at work and I became so anxious that I kind of got halfway through a sentence and like my brain just froze and I couldn't finish the sentence because it was just too stressful. So no, I don't really enjoy sort of big social events. I think actually, funnily enough, the last time I really remember enjoying myself in a really big group of people was at that gig that you guys had. It was a festival in the Gap. It was like a kind of you remember that Sunset Festival or something?
Sunlit Sounds or something?
Yeah. And I went along to that. And normally what I would do is I would go and talk to people and I would like have conversations and I'd put an awful lot of pressure on myself to get it all right and to be socially right and do everything right. And then I'd do it and then I'd go home and I'd be an absolute wreck and I'd go straight to bed, or I'd be so worked up that I'd start crying, or, but that time I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to dance to the music and I'm just going to ignore everybody. And I did that and it was fantastic. And I thought, why don't I do this more often? Like, this is actually how I'm really happy, just doing my own, like, saying hello to people, sure, like, hi, how you going? But not trying to sort of mold myself into this sort of social being that I'm not.
You said earlier that you feel connected, though, by making small talk. How does that fit in with the script?
That's what's the beauty of small talk, is the script is so easy. It's so easy. Like, if you walk past somebody who's got a dog, it's so easy to say, oh, what a gorgeous dog. Like, anybody can do that. And I know infallibly that people respond well to a lighthearted compliment. It's sort of, it's not complicated, it's easy. Whereas anything deeper than that kind of scares me, like having an actual deeper conversation. I always feel like I'm getting it wrong, I think. Not so much one-on-one. Like, I'm fine now with you. Like, that's fine. I mean, like a voice at the back of my head's going, oh, God, am I carrying on and boring you, stupid? But it's not the same as, like parties for me are just hell. I mean, I get by, but it's just very stressful.
What is the narration going on inside your head right now?
Okay, well, because it was a prepared topic, I could kind of think about it before. So I guess I'm kind of like what I was thinking about mentally to prepare, I'm sort of rehashing it. So there's not so much of a narrator at the moment as just bringing up what's been stored already.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so maybe that's why it's easier. I don't know.
Did you have another prepared topic?
Yeah, I guess childhood would be interesting, I suppose. Tim kind of suggested the childhood because I had kind of a interesting childhood, I suppose.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have a brother and I have a half-brother who's the same age as my brother that I didn't know about until I was about 25. So there you go.
Okay, I think we need to backtrack. I'm already confused. So,
sorry.
Are you the eldest?
I'm the eldest. I'm the eldest. And then I've got a younger brother he was born in 1980. And then I have a half brother who was also born in 1980.
How does that work?
Well, what can I say? My parents were freewheeling hippies, and my mum went to an ashram, true story, and I was with her. Do you know what an ashram is, right? It's like a place where you go and meditate
retreat?
And om and yeah. God, my parents sound like such hippies. But anyway, so mum went to this ashram in San Francisco with me, and while she was gone, my dad, was a freewheeling hippie and got another woman pregnant.
Was that okay in the context of their relationship, or was that infidelity?
I think it was infidelity.
So your mum wasn't happy with that?
Mum wasn't happy with it. And I think, I don't know if I'll ever have the full story on that one. But I do know that pretty much what happened after that was the woman that got pregnant pretty much left the picture completely. And my dad, we had no idea of it. And then one day we found out you've got a half brother, and I was like, wow. And we only really met him a couple of years ago. So
did your mum know when she came back from San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
She would have. I was only 3, so I can't really remember. But she found out, and Dad was like, oh man, I've got 2 women pregnant at the same time. This is a bit of a pickle. Yeah, but I think he was in love with my mum. It was just life being a bit messy.
Did your parents stay together?
Yes, my parents were together until my dad died, which was pretty awesome, I guess.
Do you have mostly fond memories of your childhood?
Yeah, look, I had quite an interesting childhood. I look back on it now, and what really strikes me is how poor we were. Like when I was a kid, I never really thought of it that way. You're just a kid, and whatever your childhood is, that's what you have. But we didn't have a flushing toilet. We lived in a sort of a little shack in the middle of nowhere in this weird little, I guess it was kind of a bit of a hippie shack because it had like a mural of a rooster on the toilet wall. And, I think my parents, like me, took a little while to grow up.
Were they young when they had you?
No.
Just hippies.
Yeah, they were just hippies, and I think they were just, my dad had a pretty crazy childhood. Like he was homeless, and he was thrown in an institution when he was a teenager. All sorts of weird stuff happened to him. So, and my mum was just a hippie, I guess, and just loved my dad. So it was he was a very complex person, my dad, and my mum loved a complex man. And yeah. Did
you grow up around Armidale?
Yeah, we grew up on a sheep farm about half an hour out of Armidale.
So you said earlier it was kind of a conservative area. How did your hippie parents kind of go in the community around there? Were there other hippies with you?
There were other hippies. There was actually a commune called Happy Valley that I vaguely remember. I think we were very much outsiders. I can remember going to school and, having seeds. Like I was actually, I remember I was like, people laughed at me at school for eating what they considered to be bird seed. And I was known as the girl that ate bird seed. And anyway, we had a bird in our classroom. And I was like, I wonder if I really do eat bird seed. And so I went and I ate some of the bird seeds like before class went in. And then, of course, the meanest kid in the class walked in on me eating the bird seeds. And, oh, my God, did I cop it for years about that. But, yeah, I think about my mum now. And what's really interesting about my mum is all the things that I was excruciatingly embarrassed about my mum back then have become cool. Like my mum used to take her own shopping bags way before it was cool. She used to and I'd be like, oh, Mum, it's so embarrassing. Why can't you just use plastic? And she taught yoga, and she did yoga, and she was a health food nut and all that kind of stuff. Back then in regional Australia, that was pretty out there, pretty embarrassing. But I look at it now and I think, wow, she was before her time, now all that stuff's really cool. Like yoga's all cool, and so is health food, and we were definitely outsiders. And I do remember actually other people's parents feeling that they didn't want me to hang out with their children, which was very painful.
Did you have many friends in school?
I used to always have one best friend. No, I didn't have many friends at school. Again, like I said, I wasn't terribly cluey socially, so no. But I always had a best friend, and that I do remember having a best friend, and her mum, I think, must have come out to visit us one time. In fact, I remember her coming to pick us up, and I think she took one look at our house and just went, whoa, who are these people? And the next week at school, she said, look, I don't want you sitting next to my daughter because she's left-handed and you keep bumping arms. And I knew that wasn't true because I was left-handed too. So I was like, no, she just doesn't want us to hang out anymore.
Aww.
Yeah, so, you know, you really feel that stuff as a kid. Things like that are probably why I've ended up feeling so passionate about things like inclusiveness and getting people with disabilities, all people included in, you know, I can't stand people who lock people out. Elitism and that kind of stuff really bothers me, and bigotry and that sort of stuff.
What else was interesting about your childhood?
Well, I guess I grew up on a sheep farm, so that was quite interesting. Like we had pet lambs and that sort of stuff. I remember my dad, we had this kid from the city come and visit us, and my dad had slaughtered a sheep and hung it up in this tree, as you do. And I was helping him like put all the different organs and things into bags and get it all ready for the chest freezer. And I remember this kid just looked so horrified and sick and freaked out. Yeah, I think that my parents copped a lot of flack for doing that. So, you know, things like that, I suppose, you know, at the time they seemed very normal, but looking back on it now, I can sort of see, wow, you know, not many people would have seen a sheep get slaughtered and hung from a tree and help their dad bag up the innards. Like, that's kind of not something most kids have done.
What do sheep innards look like?
Just pretty much what you see in the supermarket, but not in neat little containers. They're just kind of guts, yeah. And sort of actually, yeah, a lot more of other fluids as well. Like, you know, there's a bladder in there and things like that.
Did you grow things on the farm to eat as well?
Yes, we did. My dad in particular was very interested in permaculture and self-sufficiency and all of that sort of stuff. So we did a lot of that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess we were quite successful at it, really, like, because we always ate really well. You know, we didn't have money, like, at all. We had very little in the way of material possessions, but we always ate amazing food.
What did you grow on the farm?
Well, we had sheep, we raised wool. I guess we did a lot of subsistence type stuff where we fed ourselves, and so we had big fields of veggies and wheat. We had fruit trees. Yeah, everything, I suppose.
And growing your own food is a thing you do as an adult now?
Yes.
Your own family?
Yes, yeah,
Tell me about your backyard veggie patch. Well,
we don't have a backyard veggie patch, unfortunately, because we've got scrub turkeys. But what we do is we're part of the community garden.
Oh,
the
right.
Uralla Street Community Garden. And we grow a lot of herbs at home, and we grow, mainly herbs at home. And we've got wheelbarrows of herbs and things. But at the community garden, we've got a sort of about a 2 metre by 2 metre area, and we grow sort of most of our greens we get from there. We've just harvested a big crop of potatoes and beetroots and stuff. It's so much fun. I love it. I'd love to have a bigger garden. Like, that's something Tim and I would like to do at some stage, is to, you know, get some, you know, a house and have a proper big veggie patch and do all of that stuff.
What is it that you get out of gardening?
Oh.
Besides food?
It's such a beautiful relationship you have with plants. I guess it's different to animals or people, but, you know, it's a very nurturing relationship, and it's very rewarding because all you have to do is observe them and watch them. Like, people who say, oh, I kill a pot plant and I can't grow things. I think, yes, you can. All you've got to do is you look at it and see, and you can, you know, if it's wilting, give it some water. Make sure it has some fertilizer every now and again. It's so easy.
I'm one of those people who kills pot plants as well. And I think to me, it's harder than taking care of an animal because plants move slower. If you overwater it, you're not going to see signs straight away. Whereas if you overfeed your cat, it's going to stop eating at some point, and you can tell straight away. Or if you over-exercise your dog, it's going to pant and lie down. But with plants, you don't get that instant feedback. So I think that's why I find it harder to keep them alive.
I think that you're intimidated, but I think that you would be surprised at how easy it is. Like, especially, I mean, I suppose there are some plants that are incredibly finicky, and if you water them too much, they'll die, and if you don't water them enough, they'll die. But most plants are very forgiving. You know, as long as you look at the label and see whether they prefer the sun or the shade, and, you know, give them water every now and again, especially if they're looking droopy. You know, that I suppose it's one of those things that you get your confidence in the doing of it. Maybe, I don't know. And
you do keep animals as well?
We do. We have 2 cats. We've got a ginormous cat called Phil Collins, and we've got a very skinny orange cat who's actually Tim's daughter's cat called Dubsy, and we've got 2 chickens, Slobberdan and Goth Whitlam. So,
and were they rescue chickens?
They were rescue chickens, yes. They don't lay as well as ones that you would get from a proper chicken seller, but, you know, it felt good to picture these poor little things in a little cage, and now they're out in our yard enjoying worms and things. Like, that's a good feeling for sure.
When you were living in Armidale, like as an adult after uni and when you're a journalist, did you grow things then? Did you have a yard to grow things?
I had a beautiful big backyard, but at that point in my life, no, I didn't. At that point in my life, I was working full time and I was a single mum, and I was flat out doing that. It was just, I would go to work all day, come home, you know, bath time, reading, blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't seem to have any time to do anything else at that stage. So no, that was actually a time in my life where I didn't really have a garden.
How big is Armidale?
It's about, I believe, 28,000 people, although it's a university town, so that population fluctuates.
Right. Yeah, having lived in a small town all your life, what was it like moving to Brisbane?
Very hard. Very hard. It's so different living in a big city. It is so, so, so different. Yeah, like I suppose living in the Gap, that's probably why living where I am now, the Gap, it's like a small town, and maybe that's why I'm so comfortable there. You know, it's got a central shopping area, it's got the fields, and it's got places to walk, and you bump into the same people and you see the same shopkeepers and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I don't think I realised until I actually left a small town how much comfort I got from just seeing the same shopkeeper in the fruit and veggie shop every week, and just seeing the same faces around. And I felt so isolated, and I found it incredibly difficult to connect with people, and I was very, very lonely for a long time because I just simply didn't know how to create. It felt like there was a lot of people that had friendships already formed, and I didn't know how to break in and find people.
Did you know anyone in Brisbane apart from Tim?
Not really, no. And I think that was very hard, actually, because, yeah, Tim had a very large group of friends, and he's a very popular guy. And, yeah, for a long time I felt very much, you know, I suppose if you move to be with your partner and they've got a life set up and friends and everything, especially someone like Tim who does have a very public self, and a lot of people want to know Tim. Everyone wants a piece of Tim. He's a very popular guy. He's very, you know, he's a gorgeous guy. Like, everyone loves him. I felt very much in his shadow, and I didn't know how to sort of get to know people in my own self as opposed to being Tim's. I felt like for probably years, and probably until quite recently, I felt like my identity was Tim's girlfriend to other people. Like, I was just Tim's girlfriend.
And how did you break out of that?
Well, I think getting my current job now, I've sort of got a couple of colleagues now who I've connected with independently from Tim. And so they don't know me as Tim's girlfriend, they know me as Ruby. And I had a close friend from high school actually living with me for a couple of years. And I also, you know, I've met a couple of people in the Gap who we've become friends who've met Tim and I at the same time. So it's not kind of like this unbalanced friendship where it's a really close friend of Tim's and I've just kind of come in. It's sort of like we're both getting to know this person. So it's sort of, So we're on an even footing, even though, you know, oftentimes, you know, either Tim or myself might end up becoming closer friends with them.
What did Tim do to like try and to not make it seem like you were an appendage of him?
Tim was always really, really fantastic. When I first moved here, I really made an effort to get to know people, and I, you know, had people around for dinner, and Tim was always so, you know, he's always been really, really great, you know, supported me to get to know his friends. But I think, I remember Lisa talking about this when you interviewed her. I think what can sometimes happen when you've got somebody who's sort of a bit high profile, like Tim is, like he's kind of, you know, he's well known in the community in Brisbane, and for a long time our main kind of outings were to gigs and things that he went to. No matter what Tim did, there's no way that I could have ever been anything but his girlfriend in those situations, because he's in a band and they're there to see him, and, you know, that's sort of. So I think that, yeah, like Tim really made an effort to introduce me to all his friends and this and that. But, you know, these things take a long time to, you know, it takes a long time for you to transcend the girlfriend thing.
Did that ever come out as like, did you ever feel a resentment towards Tim?
No, I never did. But I think I went through a phase for a while, which was probably unfair, and I'm not proud of this, but I did feel a little bit angry at some of Tim's friends that they weren't more welcoming to me, and more, you know, I felt very sidelined, and I think part of me kind of thought, well, they just don't want to know me, and, you know, well, stuff them, I won't get to know them either. And I kind of, yeah, like I was saying, you know, my brain can take me into quite dark places, and I think I'd sort of convinced myself for a while that Tim's friends just didn't want to know me, and I think I also thought for a while, and I still sometimes feel like this, I suppose, is that because everyone kind of wants a piece of Tim, sometimes I feel like people see me as a competitor for his attention rather than...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which has been a weird one in a lot of ways. But again, like, yeah, this is probably more my stuff maybe than... I don't know. I mean, he's one of those people, isn't he? He's a ray of sunshine, and people gather around him. That's the kind of person he is. That's a beautiful thing, but it can be challenging when you're an insecure person and you're going out with someone like that sometimes. Yeah, because you do feel a little bit like, oh God, you know, I don't know. I can't explain it.
Were you familiar with Scream Feeder when you were younger?
You know what? I'd heard of them, but no. I mean, he told me that he was in Scream Feeder, and I was like, oh, hey, cool, I've heard of them. But, like, I've always been really into, like, old daggy music from the 70s and stuff. Like, I used to collect Beatles records, and I loved Lynyrd Skynyrd and Neil Young. And so, and we only got Triple J in Armidale when I was sort of very end of high school, I think. I remember it being this big deal. And before that, you know, we just didn't have the exposure to music to really have, like, I mean, there was probably some hardcore people that went and sought out the music and stuff, but it was just so different to now. Like now with the internet, everything's connected, you know, any indie music scene, you can just like go on Spotify. But back then, my way of accessing music was to go to a flea market and buy a record from the 70s. Yeah. So I didn't really have much concept of the 90s indie music scene, actually.
You didn't entirely know what you were getting into moving to Brisbane with Tim?
No, not really. No. I mean, I did know that Scream Feeder were kind of not like a little backyard affair, but it was very interesting, and I still find it really interesting sometimes when, like, because I don't really think of Tim as being... I just think of him as being Tim. Like, I mean, his Scream Feeder thing is kind of, it's part of his identity, but to me it's a much smaller part of his identity than he is to a lot of people. Like, to a lot of people, that is his identity, because they know him as Tim from Scream Feeder. And so I'll be walking along the street and Tim and I will be, you know, talking about the shopping or something, and someone will be like, oh, hey, Tim, you know, I just got your album. And it's kind of quite interesting to have all these people like that sort of know him as this completely different person and relate to him as that. It's kind of, I sort of forget.
I do too sometimes as well. And even though like I play in this other band, we all want to, and I make music with him. But someone asked me the other day, like, if it was weird that way as someone who is a big fan of Screenfeeder before I joined We All Want To. But, like, you do forget, even in the context of making music with him, I forget that he's Screenfeeder guy who made Kitten Licks, with Kelly and Dean. Like, I think the reason is it's because he's not someone who rests on his laurels and goes about being the Screenfeeder guy. And because he's such a focused guy and he's always moving forward towards the next thing.
He really is, yeah.
So in addition to the shock of moving from a small town to a big city and being with someone who was well known in the community, what was it like domestically moving in with Tim and joining your lives together?
Oh, wow. Tim and I have always, when I first moved to Brisbane, we did go through a bit of a stressful time, probably because of the teething problems that I had in adjusting to living in the city. As domestic people who live together, we actually live together so well. So we're very lucky in that way. It was interesting, and it continues to be an evolving thing, being a blended family. And, he's got a daughter, I've got a son. It's not like you don't instantaneously become family. These things take a long, long, long time. So that's been quite a interesting, I hate this word, but journey, I suppose, like becoming a sort of a family unit.
When you first moved up to Brisbane, was Tim's daughter Pascal still living with him?
Yes, she was.
Oh, right. So you really were a big blended family.
Yeah, we were. And I think it was interesting because I am such a naive person so many times. And this was another time when I was really naive. I had this idea in my head that I was going to move in with Tim and we were just going to like have family dinners every week and we were going to be this, family, and it was going to be wonderful. And that's not how things work. That's not how things work in the real world. It takes time to build a relationship with somebody's kid. And I don't think I don't know. I was just, I guess I had an intact family, so I'd never known the whole politics of getting divorced and remarried and living with a different adult and all of those things that people go through.
How did you go developing a relationship with Pascal?
At first it was very, very hard.
Because she would be in her, mid-teens?
Yeah, she was 15 and she was very much at the age where she was, much more interested in hanging out with her friends online, shut herself a lot in her room. I was probably quite volatile to live with at that time as well. Like Tim and I argued a lot back in those days and I was really struggling to find my feet. So I probably wasn't the easiest person to live with myself. So our relationship for a while was quite strained. And I think I put a lot of stress on it because I had this agenda that we were going to be close and that she was going to like me and that she was going to allow me to be I was going to join the family,
Might be the cool mum.
Yeah. I thought I'll be the cool stepmom and, you don't just up and join somebody's family. It just doesn't work like that, especially if there's all this other sort of back history that's gone behind and, you have no idea what you're walking into. You really have no idea how that all fits together. You just kind of walk in and here I am and, everyone's got to kind of get used to you, I guess.
What does it look like when you and Tim argue? I'm really curious as to how couples
argue.
Like
yes. Well, I tend to be I don't lose my temper much, but when I do, I really lose my temper. I go off and I have a big spat and I'll have a big cry. And Tim's generally, he's a very non-confrontational person, very non-confrontational. I have actually seen Tim a couple of times really lose his temper, and it's been quite sudden and I've been quite shocked. It seems like what seems like an average sort of a day and he seems a bit grumpy and I think, oh, he's a bit off, what's going on? And I'll be like, what's wrong? He's like, nothing's wrong. And then suddenly he'll just get in the car and zoom off and slam the door. And, it's only happened maybe 3 or 4 times in our relationship that's been Tim doing it. I'm usually the one that's upset and Tim's usually the one I think I'm a very blunt person, and Tim might be a lot more, he likes to dodge things if he can. Like, he'd rather just avoid it at all costs. And yeah, but we don't fight much these days. Like, we've worked out a way to kind of work through our conflicts, I think, where we kind of take the mickey out of each other. So, like, say, for example, we've worked through all the hard stuff, I suppose, at the moment. So, like, say I'm always leaving the door open and the flies get in, and so Tim will say something like, "You love leaving the door open and letting the flies in," and he'll sort of rib me about it, and then I'll stop doing it. But it's not like it's more of a sort of a joking, teasing type bickering, I suppose. But I can be quite volatile. Especially in the past, I've been quite volatile. I'm not so much now.
What effect do you think you've had on each other since you've been living together?
Ooh. I feel like we've brought out a really nice side in one another. I've become more grounded since being with Tim. Like, he's really good at action. I'm really good at ideas, and he's really good at action. So between us both, I'm actually really proud of the kind of home that we've built and the life that we've built. Like, we have our garden and our art and I think that Tim has grounded me a lot. Tim has gotten me a lot more focused, and I've grown up a lot since being with Tim. I feel like probably for the first time in my life in the last 5 years, I've actually felt like maybe I am actually an adult now, Yeah, and I feel very settled. So I suppose that's the effect. I think the effect I've had on him, I know that his diet's improved out of sight since being with me, because we're both, into growing food and that kind of stuff. So I feel like I've had a good impact on Tim that way. And I guess we have this evolving sort of humour. I suppose every couple has it, like this sort of private humour where you like kind of make these jokes. And so we've kind of, I suppose we have an impact on each other in that we have developed this kind of special interaction technique that we just have for each other that's developed over time. Kind of joking. We have our own little sort of language and little words for things, and I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing, I suppose, but I have a feeling that a lot of couples probably do it and just don't say anything. Like, they have weird names for each other and weird little language quirks and, I don't know, in-jokes and things.
Have any of Tim's friends who knew him before you were together, have they noticed anything that they mentioned to you? Like, oh, Tim used to be so much like this, but since it's been with you, he's da-da-da.
No, I think Tim's one of those people. I think that he's always been Tim and he always will be Tim. He's one of those people that, regardless of what's going on in the world, he's just such a consistent guy. Like you were saying, like there could be Armageddon going on outside and Tim would be still in his room, like writing his songs and, going on his computer and in his little Tim bubble, enjoying his life. And yeah.
What do you do for fun, Ruby?
What do I do for fun? I read a lot. I garden, obviously. I do crochet. Yeah, I guess I have sort of passions for. I love memoirs. I read a lot of memoirs, and I listen to podcasts. I particularly love agony aunt style podcasts, and I think I'm really fascinated by other humans. Probably because I feel like in some ways other humans are such a mystery to me that like I just have a fascination with people's secrets and that sort of thing. So I read a lot of memoirs and I listen to a lot of agony aunt podcasts. Have
you learned anything listening to this podcast?
Oh, yes. I've loved listening to your podcast, Scott. It has been so interesting. What's been quite interesting actually is sort of between the lines getting to know you. You'll make little observations and I'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. That's very your interviewing style actually tells a lot about you as much as, but also, like people like Lisa, like she's always fascinated me as a person. I've always been quite intrigued by Lisa. And then, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. She's got the podcast Just a Spoonful. Caitlin. Yeah. I've been listening to her podcasts, which has been really, really fantastic.
Because I guess I'm interested because, besides Lisa and Tim's last week, which you haven't heard yet because it's not out yet, but most of these are with people who are part of my life, but that you don't know at all.
Yes.
I know what I get out of podcasts, and there are some podcasts like that are not with famous people that I really enjoy.
Yes.
So what do you get out of listening to people in my world who you don't know?
Other humans are just so fascinating, and how they think and the way they put the world together and what they struggle with, and, you know, and I suppose, like, what's interesting is, to me, is that I feel like even though we're all so different and, you know, everybody's, you know, there's so many different kinds of people in the world, but a lot of the things that we feel and think and struggle with are essentially the same. And I find that very interesting. Like, I suppose, you know, part of what you look for when you're listening to other people is things that reflect something about yourself, or for me anyway, or that get you thinking about something in your own life and you go, oh, I'd do that, or oh, I never thought about that before, or, you know, I just find other people just so fascinating. I could listen to other people talk about themselves endlessly, and their lives and their stories, and especially their secrets. I mean, who's not interested in other people's secrets? Yeah, I suppose because I've never really felt quite lonely at times. So for me, art and music and especially books makes me feel an intimacy with people that I might not necessarily find easy to achieve through conversation. And probably with your podcast, that's you know, you ask all the things that I probably would love to ask if I only had the courage.
Yeah, there's something, I guess, entitling about having a microphone and asking people questions. Like, you just feel emboldened to ask things you wouldn't necessarily otherwise.
Absolutely.
You should just carry around a microphone, not plugged in, just to get that feeling of confidence.
Yeah. And people, I mean, you know, people love talking about themselves. Tim and I were actually saying it would be really super duper cool if one time we got on your podcast and hijacked the microphone and interviewed you.
You're not the first people to have that suggestion.
Really?
Both Lisa and Jeremy have offered to interview me at some stage.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I might do it for, I don't know, episode 50 or 100 or something.
Yeah, no, that would be super cool.
Maybe I'll have a tag team of revolving hosts all asking me questions.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and adding to this ever-growing tapestry of podcast web, Ruby.
I hope I wasn't too boring.
Everyone says that at the end.
Yeah.
No one thinks they're interesting.
Yeah, and yet everyone is so interesting.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting.
Thanks, Ruby.
All right, that's okay. Bye, Scott.
Corrections and notes for this episode, most of them to do with the wonderful world of gut bacteria. I said I thought that about 80% of our insides aren't really human, just bacteria. So current estimates of the number of bacteria cells versus human cells in the human body are between 3 to 1 by some estimates, or roughly equal by other studies. Even though there are more bacterial cells than human, they weigh a lot less. So you probably only have about 200 grams of bacteria in your body at any given time. Less if you've just pooped. How did Dolly the sheep get her gut bacteria? Well, gut bacteria is thought to come partly from the mother and partly from the general environment after a baby is born. Dolly was actually born out of another sheep, not straight out of a petri dish or Blade Runner goo wrapper, so her gut bacteria would probably have been the same as with any other sheep. Is the transplantation and manipulation of gut bacteria a field of medical research? Yes, it is. There is a field. It's still pretty young, and the exact makeup of everybody's gut bacteria is different, so it's a very complicated field of research. The bacteria Michael Mosley wrote about that eats mucus instead of food and starts with the letter A is Akkermansia. Thanks to Ruby for doing the legwork on that bit of research. And lastly, the population of Armidale as of the 2015 census was 23,674. But it probably fluctuates because it's a university town and students come and go. I wonder if I've broken the record for number of times the term gut bacteria was said in a podcast outro. I'm going to claim that title. I'm going to say yes. I have a bit of podcast news, actually. So this thing takes time to make, and it's not my job. I don't get paid to do it. So in addition to this podcast, which probably takes, I'll say 10 or 12 hours to produce every week, not counting the interview time itself. So apart from that, I have a paying job that I do 4 or 5 days a week. I'm an announcer at 4ZZZ, and I'm in a couple bands. And some of these other projects are not getting stuff done that needs getting done. And there's going to be more stuff actually that ramps up as we get towards the end of the year, into the new year, new things on the horizon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this podcast from being a weekly thing to a fortnightly thing. So not a big deal. And I actually always anticipated that I would have to do this at some stage. In fact, I thought I would do it much earlier than episode 18, but I just really like chatting to people, and I like getting it out there and having you people listen to it. So yeah, and I mean, mostly, to be honest, like I was missing episodes here and there anyway when I'd, go away to record an album, or my upload quota ran out for the month. So I think doing it fortnightly will be a more consistent experience for all of us involved. Oh, I've got some more podcast news for you, but not about this podcast. If you listen to episode 6 of Gimme Empathy with my friend J.M. Donnellan, you may recall that he's starting his own fictional podcast. It's like a mystery thing called 6 Cold Feet, and I played you a little preview at the end of that episode. So that thing is very close to launching. There's going to be a live event to launch it at the end of November if you're in Brisbane. So on the November 25th at a little cafe called Naim. Okay, so it's Naim, but the I has like those little 2 dots above it, like Anais Nin. Is that how you pronounce the name? Anyway, I'm going to say it's Name. Anyway, that's at 14 Collingwood Street, Paddington, here in Brisbane. November 25th. And Josh is launching his podcast. And also there will be music and poetry and a raffle. And I'm playing some music there. I'm doing a solo show. I don't think I've played a solo show in about 2 years, but I'll be doing that under my guise of Lunar Light Rail. So get along to that if you're keen. If you want to stay updated with Josh's really cool podcast, just look for 6 Cold Feet and you'll find it. There's there's a Facebook page, there's a Patreon. It's all great. All right, I'm still listening to Classic FM, but the music stopped, and now there's a dude talking in my ears, so it's getting really hard to concentrate. So I'll wrap up. Until next week, stay classical. Stay classic. Nice.